Siren's Curse is the first Vekoma Tilt Coaster to open anywhere in the world in over 20 years. When Gravity Max made its debut at Discovery World in Taiwan, it was a ride unlike anyone had ever seen before, and I think we all assumed they would start popping up all over, but that was not the case. While Chinese knockoff manufacturer Golden Horse would create a few of their own in China, Vekoma never sold another one until a few years ago when they reinvented the ride system. The first to be purchased would go to Codaland in Texas, Six Flags Qiddiya in Saudi Arabia, and Energylandia in Poland, not Cedar Point. So how did Siren's Curse end up here? Well, for one reason or another, Energylandia backed out of their purchase after the ride had already started fabrication, and so at that point, it was up for grabs for whoever was willing to pay for it. The Six Flags Entertainment Corporation bit with the intention of sending it to Six Flags Mexico. Track would show up on site, but it would never be built. Due to local restrictions involving tree removal, the park was not allowed to construct their tilt coaster, which was rumored to be themed to Harley Quinn. Red track, gray supports. So the teams at corporate had to think fast. Where could they build this ride so they could have an intended opening in 2025? Cedar Point is located on flat ground and had an empty space on the left side of the park where the former employee dorms used to sit. They had recently just intended to open up Top Thrill 2, which only operated for 8 days. That gave them some less than desirable press for 2024, so how do you make it up? By debuting another new roller coaster as an apology. Top Thrill 2 would reopen on opening day 2025, and Siren's Curse would open just a few months later. It is the first Vekoma Tilt Coaster in the Western Hemisphere, stands 130 feet tall, features a tilt track that when at its highest point reaches 160 feet, top speed 58 miles per hour, flipping riders through 2 inversions. Despite starting construction after Codaland's, Siren's Curse did open before Circuit Breaker and is exactly the type of OMG wow ride that Cedar Point would build. Here at the roller coaster capital of the world, every edition is meant to be crazier than the last. The park has 5 roller coasters over 200 feet tall, many rides here breaking multiple records upon their debut, and it has caused Cedar Point to just explode with popularity. Their ride lineup was already super strong, and objectively, they didn't need a tilt coaster. It certainly would have been more welcome elsewhere, but that being said, one thing Cedar Point does need is capacity, because when this park gets busy, the lines can be unbearable. And if there's one thing that Siren's Curse does do, it's draw in the crowds. The odds are extremely slim that anyone who experiences this ride has ever experienced anything else like it before. The concept of separating a piece of track so that riders are just dangling in midair, anxiously waiting to reconnect, is the ultimate gimmick. And this is coming from the park that has a B&M dive coaster directly next door. You thought the drop on Valraven was scary? Well, it just got outdone by a ride about 100 feet shorter. But where Valraven can feel like a one-trick pony, Siren's Curse makes up for it with a strong layout to follow. Almost 3,000 feet of track, multiple twisted airtime hills, 2 corkscrews, onboard audio, onboard lights. This is a full package experience and delivers in just about every single way. While you can make an argument that Cedar Point did not need Siren's Curse, it absolutely is now one of the best rides in the park. And when you already had 17 other roller coasters, that is tough to do. But Siren's Curse found its niche. The ride feels fundamentally different than every other attraction here, and I could not get enough of it. I had the opportunity to experience Siren's Curse, I think, 5 times over the course of the 2 days I spent at Cedar Point, and the more I rode it, the more I liked it. In this review, we're going to cover the entire experience from start to finish, discuss everything that you need to know should you head out to Cedar Point to ride it. And I think one of the first things that we really have to cover is general presentation, because the actual location of Siren's Curse in Cedar Point has its pros and cons. The biggest con being that it looks small next to Valraven and would probably have a better presence somewhere else. The pro, however, being that it really was the perfect amount of track for this space. This little corner of the park was kind of a dead zone. It would occasionally be used for live entertainment, and at one point they actually had a set of monster trucks that you could go riding around in, but it seemed like they were just waiting for the perfect opportunity to put in a more permanent structure, and they found it. They had no problem rerouting Perimeter Road to circle around Siren's Curse, allowing guests to occupy a little corner of the park that previously you couldn't really access. And with the name Siren's Curse and its theme to eerie freight, the backdrop right up against the water really works in the ride's favor. The story here is that you're entering an old abandoned shipyard. You'll enter along a boardwalk, passing over a section of water that they built just for this ride. You'll see lots of rusted old shipping containers, lots of ambient noise in the queue. You won't find any fun TVs here. Instead, there's a guard shack with a radio station playing different songs, and in between, there's various sound bites about the mysterious things going on in the area, like people going missing. And it feels like one of the best attempts at a true theme and story that we've seen at Cedar Point. I remember when this ride was initially announced, I was a little apprehensive about the theme. I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. But after seeing it in person, I totally dig it. The general aesthetic really works, like something mysterious is going on. They actually painted the base of all the supports to have this rusted metal look, some of them even covered in vines, which they didn't have to do. But it looks so nice. The outside of the station totally looks like something that you'd see in an abandoned shipyard. It might be the best looking station exterior in the park. And it's an interesting contrast from this sleek, nice looking Vekoma coaster. I think my biggest critique that I probably would have changed is I think I would have done different colors for the track. Cedar Point already has several red roller coasters. I think the gray supports are fine. I would have done a more ominous color like black, or if they wanted to really lean into the Siren look, they could have done like an aqua teal, or maybe something completely different like purple. I don't know, that could have worked. I don't love the red. I just look at it and see Harley Quinn, but that's just me. Before you enter the station, all smaller loose items will have to be put in these double-sided lockers before you go through metal detection. It is an almost identical setup that you have over at Steel Vengeance. Several sections of this ride get really close to guest pathways, so they don't want to have any loose articles flying off, which makes total sense. It's a really easy to use system, and once you're through the metal detectors, all it is a stairway wait into the station. Siren's Curse operates with 2 trains with 6 cars per train, so that's 24 passengers per vehicle. It has the block zone capability of operating with 3, and there are multiple points where we saw the ride operators hit interval where a train is going up the lift hill and the previous train has not hit the brake run. And it takes a second to park, and with a ride like this constantly hitting 75, 90 minutes even, I would love to see them get a 3rd train for Siren's Curse. It 100% would increase throughput because I saw multiple instances where the ride operators were literally just waiting for the previous train to return because they were just too fast, which is a good problem to have. I just think when it was built for Energylandia and then Six Flags Mexico, they were not in need of 3 trains. So we'll have to see if that's something they look into one day. Riders will pull down their over-the-shoulder restraint and buckle the seatbelt. It's this very comfortable vest. I much prefer it to the vest that you get on a ride like Valraven Next Door. Those vests can feel a bit more restrictive, and this really allows for airtime. Many of the hills on Siren's Curse are profiled in a way that you just kind of lurch forward, and the vest doesn't prevent that from happening. And because of the tilt mechanism, a lap bar really would not have been ideal. You're dangling there at 90 degrees for a prolonged period of time. You need upper body support. And once you receive the all clear, you'll start your climb up to the top. A relatively quiet lift hill, fast climb up 130 feet, receiving amazing views at the top. It feels like every time Cedar Point opens up a new roller coaster, I'm like, wow, look at the view from here. There really isn't a bad vantage point in the park, but I love looking out at Valraven to the right, Top Thrill 2 and Rougarou and Millennium Force to the left, and of course beautiful Lake Erie. It is so nice. And Siren's Curse will take a slight left-handed turn so you can align with the tilt track, and from the moment you take that slight turn until you actually begin the tilting mechanism, it's about 20-25 seconds to park. So it really gives you time to enjoy that view and help build anticipation. And Siren's Curse features onboard audio, so there's speakers in the back of your headrest. So they're playing these various sound bites to immerse you in the experience. At the top, you're actually going to hear the sirens calling out to you. They're drawing you to the edge of the tilt track. In this very serene voice, they're saying, "You have been lured by the sirens. Come to us." And then the vehicle locks in place and you begin your tilt. And they're playing this creaking sound effect. And it is scary, especially if you're sitting in the front row. That is by far the best view. Seeing the track in front of you just end is a wild sensation. It's one of those moments when you're like, yep, I'm putting a lot of trust in this thing, but luckily the teams at Vekoma are pros at this. They put in hundreds of thousands of hours of testing into this tilt. I have no doubt in my mind that it is as safe as can be no matter what the mainstream media tells you. You are going to be perfectly safe on Siren's Curse. And after experiencing this multiple times, I really was kind of going back and forth on like where the best place to sit on this coaster is. Because the view in the front is crazy, but when you sit in the back, you rise up 30 feet higher than that initial lift height. And that is a crazy sensation. Suddenly, the drop feels significantly bigger than it was before. From those last couple rows, you have way more time to enjoy that free fall sensation. But that being said, if there is a downside to the vest, I didn't feel like you float up out of your seat as much on this drop compared to other roller coasters. It reminds me of how like B&M dive coasters used to have those standard over the shoulder restraints. And then when the train would release, you would like fall to the back of your seat. And then as soon as they swapped them out for the vests, that floating sensation just isn't the same. And the main reason I bring this up is because I actually got the opportunity to experience Gravity Max over in Taiwan, and that has a ratcheting over the shoulder restraint. There's no vest, and when that train releases, you slam to the back of your seat. It is crazy airtime. And so actually, I prefer that drop over the drop on Siren's Curse, despite the fact that Gravity Max's drop is smaller, 114 feet. But I think one thing that actually works in Gravity Max's favor is it feels like more of a drop in that you are free falling for longer, because what Siren's Curse does is it actually whips you to the left pretty much immediately after releasing. So for that reason, I'm actually more excited for the tilt and drop on Circuit Breaker and Iron Rattler. Iron Rattler especially is over 200 feet tall. I think that tilt coaster is going to be crazy. I cannot wait to experience that. But it was cool talking to people who had never experienced a tilt track before and were trying to describe it. Some of them said that it felt like a drop tower in the way that like your stomach drops upon release. And I think that's a decently accurate description. If you consider yourself like a roller coaster pro and they don't faze you anymore, you might be surprised experiencing a tilt coaster. It might give you a feeling that you haven't felt in a long time. So after the train releases, I mentioned, you immediately whip to the left. You're passing out over the water and then rise up into this airtime pop that you get like ejected pretty much in the front row. You won't feel as much in the back, but I was definitely caught off guard when I rode this up front. I liked that moment a lot. And then at the top, that's when you whip sharply downwards to the right, back over the water into one of the most forceful parts of the coaster. Don't get me wrong, you feel a decent amount of G's at the bottom of the drop, but this moment right here is so tight that you're just like pressed into the bottom of your seat, and then you whip into inversion number 1, a corkscrew. And I love that succession of elements, that you have this like big airtime moment, and you're dropping low to the ground, and you take this like low inversion. So much of Siren's Curse takes place not that high off the ground, and it helps it keep a good pace. So you roll through this element, fly through the tilt tower, banking to the right, and then you enter a triple down. But not just any triple down, this is a twisted triple down. So you bank to the left, twist to the right, and then your final hill is straight in line into the first and only tunnel at Cedar Point. This park has an extremely low water table, only about 5 feet, and this tunnel is 20 feet underground. I remember a quote several years ago where a spokesman from Cedar Point said, "We will never build a tunnel at Cedar Point because of the water table." And so when they announced Siren's Curse, I was surprised that this coaster would feature a tunnel, and I was wondering how that would work. Turns out it was very, very complicated. And someone from the park afterwards said, "Yeah, we're not doing that again." But I'll tell you what, that tunnel really works here with Siren's Curse, because even though it's short, they pump it with fog. So especially at night, you have something that you're flying through. And as you're waiting in line, you can stand on that tunnel and watch the trains fly below your feet. It's pretty cool, and I loved that triple down leading up to it. Each of those hills sends you up out of your seat. From the bottom of this tunnel, you rise up and rotate to your right, flipping into what people are calling a non-inverting loop. I don't think it's quite profiled in a way to officially be called that, but in a way, it does bring a similar sensation that you never actually go upside down, but you're whipping around, and this is the most intense part of the ride. It is so forceful that as you're coming out of that element, banking to the right, I definitely grayed out. It's a really sustained turn, and I did not expect that going in. Who would have thought that like halfway through the ride, that's when you'd be experiencing the most G-forces? And from that right-handed turn, Siren's Curse will suddenly whip you to the left in this twisted airtime hill, and then you roll over into your second inversion. I like this roll. It feels pretty similar to the first, but I think the first just has a little bit better profiling. You get more whip through it. And this is when things really get fun. Every single moment from here on out is like a side profiled airtime twist. So there's a banked hill up against the tilt tower, a right-handed turn, another twist to the left where you launch out of your seat, a twist from the left to the right, and then a final pop into the brake run. It's those hills at the end that make me actually, I think, prefer the front row over the back. In the front, the airtime is just so solid. The tilt and drop, I think, is probably better in the back, but every other moment on this ride, I think you take it better in the front. But you definitely are going to want to try both. And if you like it during the day, this has also become a must-do night ride. Each car on Siren's Curse has an LED strip with color-changing lights. So as you're climbing up the lift hill, it's green, and then when you arrive at the tilt track, it turns red, stays red for the first half of the layout, and then halfway through, switches back to green. It is freaking awesome. One of those things that, like, as a rider, you personally won't be able to see, but as you're waiting to experience this thing, it looks so nice. You could be anywhere in the park looking out at Siren's Curse, and you'll know when it's cycling because you'll see the little lights going around. It's pretty awesome. Overall, Siren's Curse is a really satisfying ride length. There was a little part of me that was worried it would feel short, but after experiencing it, I really don't think so. For having a top speed of less than 60 miles per hour, you are moving through this course the entire time. Not an inch of track was wasted. Every hill hits. Some of those twisting motions that you get are just so satisfying. The fluidity between elements is literally perfect. This is one of the smoothest roller coasters you will ever ride. Not a hint of a rattle, vibration, or shake. I think this and Steel Vengeance, those are your two smoothest rides in the park, easily. I've done a lot of these next generation Vekoma thrill coasters, and while it rides pretty similar in terms of like smoothness and how the trains feel, Siren's Curse had better pacing than some of the others I'd done. I think the ride I would compare this most to is probably Phoenix at Far Up Summerland. I ended up liking Siren's Curse more than Abyssus and Formula at Energylandia, but not as much as Let Coaster at Legendia. That is still my favorite Vekoma thrill coaster. I think that thing is just like absolutely insane with how intense it is. But I think Siren's Curse can confidently take my number 2 spot for favorite Vekoma thrill coaster. I think Vekoma and Cedar Point knocked this ride out of the park. It is going to be such a people pleaser. Enthusiasts will love the tilt, the airtime, and the positive G-forces. The general public will love the fluidity and how smooth it is, but still thrilling, but not too crazy. Like, don't get me wrong, there are more intense rides in this park, but that's where Siren's Curse like fills that gap. This ride might not have been necessary for Cedar Point, but it works extremely well here. And I think the numbers speak for themselves. I mean, this ride has been generating some long wait times. Even if you have fast lane, be prepared to wait at least half an hour if you go on like a standard day. I really hope the teams at Cedar Point and Six Flags are satisfied with this experience because I would love to see more rides like this in the chain. Hopefully with a different layout, because something interesting, the layout of Siren's Curse is meant to be a clonable ride. It's known as their cliffhanger model. Right now it feels original because it's the only one out there. But this was created with the intention of just being something that you could drop into most parks. So I'll be curious to see if Vekoma ends up selling any clones of this ride. Because as much as I like it, I would love to see some more custom courses with this because I'm looking at rides like Iron Rattler and it just looks so cool. I can think of a couple parks in this chain where a ride like that would do extremely well. Looking at you, Carowinds and King's Dominion, you got some prime real estate there where you had an old roller coaster. That tilt coaster would be a fantastic fit. So for a final score of Siren's Curse, I'm giving it a 10 out of 10, guys. I loved this ride from start to finish. I think Cedar Point did a great job theming it up. The layout is so satisfying. The tilt is incredible. Everyone who worked on this ride should be really proud of themselves. As of now, I have it at number 3 in the park behind Steel Vengeance and Maverick. But honestly, Cedar Point has such a stacked lineup. I've heard from people saying it's their number 4 or 5 in the park, and that's not meant to be a dig against Siren's Curse. It's just that Cedar Point has such a strong lineup. Everyone's going to be different, but I thoroughly enjoyed this experience. You got to come out here and give it a try. Let me know down in the comments below if you agree with the points that I brought up. If you're new to the channel, please go check out the Coaster Reviews playlist. I've reviewed rides from all around the world and they're all organized in alphabetical order by the ride's name. Go see if your favorite is on there and make sure to stay tuned for more here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.